Are there any pre-trial matters that either side needs to cover?
Yes, Your Honor. We asked permission to further down the courtroom.
Granted.
Would you like us to swear in witnesses all together or individually as they wish to stand?
I'll swear in the witnesses as a group.
Where would you like us to place exhibits once they've been attended in evidence?
Why don't we put them up here on this counter?
And we ask any objections to be heard outside the presence of the jury to be done so constructively from counsel tables, since this is an extrajudicial exercise.
That's fine.
And lastly, I would like to take this opportunity to inform the court that I have a pre-existing medical condition that causes me to spontaneously hiccup. If I do this during the course of the trial, I need no disrespect to you, opposing counsel, or members of the jury.
We understand. Thank you.
At this point, the case is ready to proceed.
Now, I'm going to ask all persons who will be testifying in this trial to stand up. Raise your hand. Do you promise that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition?
I do.
Thank you. May be seated. All right. We'll begin with opening statements and ask that the state go first. You ready?
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. Desperation is no excuse for murder. The defendant got into debt after taking out a loan from Bobby Bacalauleri. Mr. Bacalauleri required payments on the loan at certain intervals, but the defendant could not pay these. As time passed, Mr. Bacalauleri started to demand his money. The defendant became desperate, and at one meeting, she made a seemingly empty threat that if Mr. Bacalauleri left his goons at home, by which she meant his bodyguards, then she would take care of him all by herself. Although Mr. Bacalaueri's frequent demands for payment became overbearing, the defendant's desperation is no excuse for the murder that she committed, which leads us to Bobby Bacalaueri's death. Another meeting was set up through text for January 26, 2013. The defendant, who still didn't have the money, agreed to this meeting with a text saying, "Fine, but this is it, one way or another." On the night of the meeting, when the two met on the top floor of the Miltonville parking garage, a struggle broke out between them. The defendant was able to gain the upper hand, but instead of leaving the scene without being a part of any more trouble, she pushed Bobby Bacalauleri over the wall of the parking garage to his death. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jonas Lanzanita, and I, along with my co-counsel, Kayla Forte and Ashley Fleck, represent the state of Georgia in this case. The reason we're here is because the defendant is charged with murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault. Now, as you listen to the evidence presented in this trial, remember that we, the state, must prove the following elements: that the defendant caused the death of Bobby Bacalauleri with malice aforethought, that the defendant committed the murder while also committing the felony of aggravated assault, and that the defendant assaulted Bobby Bacalauleri with a gun that was likely to, or actually did, cause serious bodily injury. That is our burden of proof. And we gladly accept that burden. We will prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt. And remember that a reasonable doubt is based on common sense and logic, not emotion. Now let's turn our attention to the night of the incident. Bobby Bacalauleri had his younger sister, Ronnie Bacalauleri, drive into the Miltonville parking garage. Ronnie drove to the ninth deck, and her brother got out of the car when the defendant showed up. As she was waiting in the car, Ronnie heard a loud bang, like a gunshot. So she rolled down her window to look outside and saw the defendant and her brother wrestling. She will tell you how she saw the defendant push her brother over the wall of the 9th floor of the parking garage. After witnessing that, she frantically drove down to the ground level to find her brother. He was a broken, twisted, bloody mess. Lieutenant Walden Kane, the detective that led the investigation of Bobby Bacalaueri's murder, arrived on the scene moments later. The lieutenant was selected by Milton County Sheriff to be trained in the processing of a crime scene, and he attended every available training course on the subject. On the night of the incident, he searched the area around the main entrance of the parking garage. He found a gun, and later bagged it for forensic testing. He proceeded to the top floor of the parking garage, where he photographed the crime scene, matched the placement of the evidence, and then secured the scene so that he could return the next morning to retake the evidence photos. After securing the scene, he talked to Ronnie Bacalari, the only eyewitness to the crime. Then he went to the police station to process the gun that he found. There was a fingerprint on the top slide of the gun that matched the defendant. With this information, Lieutenant Payne called the defendant in for a voluntary interview. But in the middle of it, the defendant ran out of the interrogation room. The next morning after the interview, Lieutenant Payne arrested the defendant. He continued his investigation after the arrest by interviewing Sean LaBouche, a former bodyguard of Bobby Bacalari's. Mr. LaBouche told the lieutenant about the debt that the defendant owed Mr. Bacalari. This debt made the defendant desperate, and this desperation is what caused the defendant to kill Bobby Bacalari. But again, desperation is no excuse for murder. Now, I've given you a basic overview of the case, but as the trial continues, the details will fall into place. And after you've listened to all of the evidence, you will find the defendant guilty on all charges. Thank you.